This is Bluebook Digital SAT 5, Reading and Writing Module 1. According to a team of neuroeconomists from the University of Zurich, ease of decision-making may be linked to communication between two brain regions, the prefrontal cortex and the parietal cortex. Individuals tend to be more decisive if the information flow between the regions is intensified, whereas they make choices more slowly when information flow is... So you see a clear contrast here. So more decisive if the flow is intensified, whereas, so on the flip side, I'm going to guess it's the opposite of intensified, which is, seems like it's just reduced, not evaluated, not determined or acquired. Ecologist E.E. and colleagues found that the inhabitants of the Mexica Empire used natural landmarks to track time with a high degree of blank. By observing the sun's position in relation to various points on the mountains surrounding the basin of Mexico, the Mexica were able to precisely identify the dates when significant events such as solstices occurred. So they could precisely identify, which is to say that they had a high degree of, must be precision, so it's not precariousness, that would be hesitance or shakiness or uncertainty. It's exactitude, not resilience, not inconspicuousness, as in it was somehow not salient, not jumping out at you. In editor L.Y.'s introduction to her anthology, The Future is Female, More Classic Science Fiction Stories by Women, Y identifies an increasing sense of blank feminist mode of writing in the 1970s, in contrast to many women-authored science fiction stories of the 1920s and 1960s whose politics were less deliberately signaled. An increasing sense of blank... of a blank or an blank feminist mode, which is in contrast to what was less deliberately signaled. So it's the opposite of less deliberately signaled, as in more directly signaled. Not prudently, that has to do with wisdom. Overtly is the answer, right? Overt is the opposite of covert. So overt is out in the open or done obviously and clearly and directly. Not cordially, that's about politeness. Not inadvertently, that's by accident. KDL and colleagues found that the sun's corona provides an advanced indication of solar flares, intense eruptions of electromagnetic radiation that emanate from active regions in the sun's photosphere that can interfere with telecommunications on Earth. Preceding a flare, the corona temporarily exhibits increased brightness above the region where the flare is. Preceding a flare, you see it exhibit increased brightness above the region where the flare is, well, I would have said about to happen, which is an advanced indication. Where the flare is antecedent, close, but that means comes before, probably chronologically, so no. The flare is impending, makes the most sense to me, as in about to happen. Innocuous means harmless, perpetual, definitely not. Following text adapted from Gene Webster's 1912 novel Daddy Longlegs. The narrator is a young college student writing letters detailing her weekly experiences. The college is organizing the freshman basketball team, and there's just a chance that I shall make it. I'm little, of course, but terribly quick and wiry and tough. While the others are hopping about in the air, I can dodge under their feet and grab the ball. Choice best states the main purpose. To compare basketball with other sports, definitely not. To provide details of how to play basketball, I don't think so. To state how players will be chosen for the basketball team, don't think so. To explain why the narrator thinks she might make the basketball team, yeah, because she's little and can move about more quickly than the others. Researchers have long hypothesized that woolly mammoths were hunted to extinction in North America by humans using spears with groove tips known as Clovis points. One anthropologist set out to test this hypothesis. Using a mechanical spear thrower, he launched spears with Clovis points into mounds of clay, substitutes for the animals' large bodies. The projectiles generally penetrated only a few inches into the clay, an amount insufficient to have harmed most woolly mammoths. This led the anthropologists to conclude that hunters using spears with Clovis points likely weren't the principal drivers of the extinction. Best states the main purpose. To argue for the significance of new findings amid an ongoing debate among researchers. I don't think so, but I'm going to leave that. So I don't see the debate. So I see the hypothesis, right? Researchers have long hypothesized that, as in that's what they've consistently said was probably true for a long time. To discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the method used in an experiment? No. To compare two competing hypotheses? I don't think so. To describe an experiment whose results cast doubt on an established hypothesis? Yes. So, the fact that it turns out the hunters didn't cause the extinction casts doubt on the hypothesis that they were hunted to extinction by humans. The ancient writing system used in the Maya kingdom of southern Mexico and Central America had a symbol for the number 0. The earliest known example of the symbol dates to more than 2,000 years ago. At that time, almost none of the writing systems elsewhere in the world possessed a 0 symbol. And the use of 0 in Mexico and Central America may be even more ancient. Some historians suggest that Maya mathematicians inherited it from the Olmec civilization, which flourished in the region 2,400 to 3,600 years ago. According to the text, what do some historians suggest about Maya civilization? Maya civilization acquired the use of 0 from the Olmec civilization. I think so, right? Isn't that what it said to the end? They suggest that they inherited it from the Olmec civilization. Maya civilization respected its historians more than it respected... No. Maya civilization was highly secretive about its intellectual achievements? No. Maya civilization tried to introduce its writing system to other civilizations? No. It's that it inherited the 0 from what came before. A subject of much speculation, distinctive sets of parallel ridges mark the icy crust of Europa, Jupiter's smallest moon. Researchers now claim that the ridge's formation mechanism mirrors that of a strikingly similar pair on Greenland's ice sheet. There, surface water seeped through fissures in the sheet and formed a water pocket that subsequently disrupted the overlying ice, forcing fragments of it upward and outward onto peaks as the pocket froze and expanded. Although Europa lacks liquid surface water, the same process could be driven by the moon's subsurface ocean. Which choice best states the main idea? Researchers think that the ridges on Europa and the ridges in Greenland may have been formed by the same process, even though Europa, unlike Greenland, doesn't have liquid water on its surface. That actually sounds good to me. The primary difference between the ridges on Europa and the ridges in Greenland is that, unlike the Europa ridges, the Greenland ridges are parallel. Well, no, because the ones in Greenland are strikingly similar, so they are parallel, so it's not that. The pair of ridges found on Greenland's ice sheet appear to have formed long before the recently discovered sets of ridges on Europa formed. I don't think it says when they formed. Researchers don't understand why Europa is marked by so many sets of ridges when the moon doesn't have any liquid water on its surface and could have collected and expanded under the... when the moon doesn't have any liquid water on its surface that could have collected and expanded under the icy crust. I don't think it mentions that there are so many of them or that mystery, so I think it's just A here. To understand how Paleolithic artists navigated dark caves, archaeologist M.A. and her team tested different lighting methods in a cave in Spain using replicas of artifacts found in European caves with art. They used 3 different Paleolithic light sources: torches, animal fat lamps, and fireplaces, determining that each likely had a specific purpose. For instance, the team learned that the animal fat lamps were less useful than torches while walking because the lamps didn't illuminate the cave floor. Which choice best states the main idea of the text? M.A. and her team's study demonstrated that fireplaces were essential to the creators of Paleolithic cave art. I don't think so. They determined that each had a... Well, that may be true, but I don't think that's the main point. M.A. and her team discovered that Paleolithic cave artists in Spain use animal fat lamps more often than they use torches. I thought animal fat lamps were less useful than torches, so I don't think it's that one. M.A. and her team were reluctant to draw many conclusions from their study because of the difficulty they had replicating light sources based on known artifacts. I don't think that's definitely not the main point, the main idea. M.A. and her team tested Paleolithic light sources and learned some details about how Paleolithic artists traveled within dark caves. Yeah, they learned some details, as in, for instance, they learned this thing. It's also not the first answer choice. They demonstrated that fireplaces were essential. even if that was true, that's not the main point. It's that they studied different types of light. Okay. So I try to make sense of the charts before I read the words here. So cellular and molecular goes up and then down a little bit. Medicine and health goes flat and then up. Physics and space goes relatively flat, and then animal science is flat and then up. Okay? Student is researching the trends in the topic submitted to a national science fair for high school students. The graph shows the number of submissions by topic that were made each year. Based on the data in the graph, the student claims that there were more medicine and health research topics submitted in 2019 than in any other year. There were more medicine and health in 2019 than in any other year. So medicine and health is the circular dots in 2019. That is true. Yeah. Than in any other year in this study. Yeah. Okay. Most effectively uses data from the graph to support the underlying claim. In 2016, the number of cellular and molecular biology topic submissions was the same as the number of animal science. Well, that might be true, but that can't be the answer. It has to be about how medicine and health was higher in 2019 than in the other years. In 2019, there were more physics and space. No. The lowest number of animal science topics was no. The highest number of medicine and health topic submissions during the period is shown as approximately 285 in. Yeah, it has to be that one, right? So this is a perfect example of when all four of the answer choices could be true, but only one of them relates to what it's asking, right? So if you don't read the question, it could have been any of these, but it's D as in dog. Looking Back on Girlhood is an 1892 short story by S.O.J. In the story, the narrator explains that she prefers her hometown to other places she has visited. She prefers her hometown to other places she has visited, as in going to be set up with an explanation by the quote. Most effectively illustrates the claim. There is always something fresh, something to be traced or discovered, something particular to be remembered. No. Two large rivers join just below the village at the head of tidewater, and these, with a great inflow from the sea, make a magnificent stream, bordered by lovely green fields and slope gently. Well, it can't be that because that doesn't compare more than one place, right? It has to be she prefers where she grew up to other places she has been. I have had a good deal of journeying in my life, and taken great delight in it, but I have never taken greater delight than in my rides and drives and tramps and voyages within the borders of my native town. Yes. There is never-ending pleasure in making oneself familiar with such a region. No. It's got to be C, because that's the only one that compares more than one place. External shopping cues are a type of marketing that uses obvious messaging, a display featuring a new product, for example, or a buy one, get one free offer, to entice consumers to make spontaneous purchases. In a study, data scientists S.H. and colleagues found that this effect can also be achieved with a less obvious cue, rearranging a store's layout. The researchers explained that trying to find items in new locations causes shoppers to move through more of the store, exposing them to more products and increasing the likelihood that they'll buy an item they hadn't planned on purchasing. Which response from a survey given to shoppers who made a purchase at a retail store best supports the researchers' explanation? So the explanation, as shown by the word explain, of course, is that when you're trying to find stuff and you don't know where it is, you walk through more of the store, which exposes you to more products and makes it likely that you'll buy some other thing you weren't originally planning to. Okay. I needed to buy some cleaning supplies, but they weren't in the regular place. While I was looking for them, I saw this interesting notebook and I decided to buy it. Yeah, I think it is that, but let's look at all four. I didn't buy everything on my shopping list today. I couldn't find a couple of items at the store, even though I looked. No. The store sent me a coupon for a brand of soup, so I came here to find out what kinds of soup the brand offers. I decided to buy a few. No. The store is larger than one that's close to where I live and it carries more products. I came here to buy some things that the other. No. Even with the widespread adoption of personal computers, many authors still choose to write and revise their novels by hand and only then transcribe the final versions on a computer. It may be tempting to speculate about how a novel written this way would be affected if it had been exclusively typed instead, but each novel is a unique entity resulting from a specific set of circumstances. Therefore, which choice most logically completes the text? It may be tempting to speculate how a novel written that way could be affected if you type the whole thing, but every novel is unique. Therefore, something like you can't do it or it doesn't work. But let's see. In order to increase their efficiency, authors who currently write... Well, no. That's the trick wrong answer. It's saying that you can't speculate on that. Authors who do most of their drafting and revising by hand likely have more success than those who... No, it's not judging and comparing. Novels written by hand take... I don't think so. It's got to just be... There is no way to reasonably evaluate how a work would be different. Yes. So it may be tempting to speculate, but basically you can't speculate, which is D as in dog. Behavioral ecologists WW, SB, and SW recently examined the behavior of field-collected and laboratory-reared bold-jumping spiders, PA. They found a positive association between experimental high-protein diets and aggressive behavior in field-collected males, and a similar association between experimental high-lipid diets and aggressive behavior in lab-reared males. Additionally, field-collected spiders showed a preference for flowers manipulated to display ultraviolet fluorescence, whereas lab-reared spiders showed a preference for flowers dyed with red food coloring that was not fluorescent. W.B. and Weiler therefore concluded that... So let me try to simplify this to its essence. So in field-collected male spiders, as in the ones that are in the wild, there's an association between high-protein diet and aggressive behavior, okay? And then in the lab-reared, as in grown in a lab rather than out in the real world, there's an association between high-lipid diets and aggressive behavior, okay? And then similarly, field-collected like ultraviolet flowers and lab-reared like dyed flowers, okay? They concluded that rearing conditions likely affect the responses of bold-jumping spiders to experimental stimuli. Being raised in a laboratory setting reduces aggression among male bold-jumping spiders. I don't think so, because they're still aggressive in both circumstances, the wild ones and the lab-reared ones, so no. Laboratory settings are more suitable for studying bold-jumping spiders' diets than their... No, because they can draw both outcomes. Experiments involving bold-jumping spiders should make use of lab-reared individuals. I don't think so. I think it's just the first one. I think what they're saying is... They're basically saying it does matter. It does matter whether they're natural ones that grew up outside or they're ones that were raised in the laboratory. It does matter. So rearing conditions, as in were they wild reared or lab reared, does impact, I guess in this case it has to do with what sort of flowers they respond to or what sort of colors they respond to. I think it's A. In forecasting weather events, meteorologists sometimes discuss the role of atmospheric rivers. What are atmospheric rivers and how blank? It's got to be a question, so it's either C or D. Part of the water cycle, atmospheric rivers are narrow channels of moisture moving through the atmosphere. In certain conditions, these rivers can release some of their moisture as precipitation. And how do they affect our weather? And how they do... Oh, it's just C. The soundtrack to Mira Nair's 1991 film Mississippi Masala expressively captures the clashing of cultures that happens when blank, a young Indian woman from Uganda and a young African-American man from Mississippi meet. It's two protagonists. So protagonist is not possessive. The protagonists meet. So these are gone. And its is a possessive adjective for the film, which is its with no apostrophe, rather than the contraction it is that appears in answer choice A. J.A.'s 1994 novel In the Time of the Butterflies, a fictionalized account of the lives of the Mirabal sisters, can serve as a starting point for those wanting to explore how the rule of dictator R.T. has been represented in Dominican American literature. A fictionalized account of the lives of the Mirabal sisters. Yeah. Because you could jump over what's between the commas, right? J.A. Alvarez's 1994 novel In the Time of the Butterflies can serve as a starting point for those wanting to, On March 23, 2021, a gust of wind wreaked havoc on global trade. Ever Given, an international shipping container vessel, became lodged in Egypt's Suez Canal, a major shipping route between Europe and Asia. The vessel took 6 days to dislodge, in part due to its sheer size. It's as heavy as 2,000 blue whales when fully loaded. This is why it's really important to always read the entire thing, including what comes after, right? It's as heavy as 2,000 blue whales when fully loaded. It's not A or C, because those would both be a comma splice mistake, right? You can't say comma and a whole new sentence. And it's not D as in dog, because if you have no punctuation at all after size, you can't even make sense of it. It's a colon, because the fact that it's as heavy as 2,000 blue whales is the definition of its sheer size, or is a confirmation of the fact that it was difficult to dislodge because of its sheer size. Woven from recycled yarn and hand-tufted using a carpet weaving technique passed down by the artist's Turkish grandmother, blank so lush and tactilely inviting that you are tempted to reach out and touch them. This has got to be a modifier mistake, or an issue of modifiers. So, woven from recycled yarn and whatever, comma, the very next thing has to be the thing that was actually woven. The topological tapestries, maybe. The Argentine textile artist, no, because that would make it sound like the artist herself was woven. It's not when. And it's not, it's just A, because that's the only one that's not a modifier mistake. Jamaican-British artist Willard Wigan is known for his remarkable blank. So small that they are best viewed through a microscope, Wigan's sculptures are made from tiny natural materials such as spiderweb strands. See, it's all about reading the entire thing. Creation so small that they are best viewed through a microscope, Wigan's sculptures are made from tiny natural materials such as spiderweb strands. It has to just be C, right? This has to be a separate thought. This has to be its own sentence. After appropriate permissions are granted, a typical archaeological dig begins with a surveyor making a detailed grid of the excavation site. Then the site is carefully dug, and any artifacts found are recorded and mapped onto the site grid. Blank, the artifacts are removed, cataloged, and analyzed in a laboratory. This just seems like chronological order. So, after the permissions are granted, they start the dig, then they do something else, and then later. So, finally, it must just be finally, right? In 1949, FZ developed an ice rink resurfacing machine. As Zamboni's machine moved along the rink surface, it first scraped off the top layer of ice. Blank, it sprayed water into the deep grooves left behind by customer skates. Lastly, it smoothed over the newly formed ice. This is the same as the previous question, right? It's chronological order. It first did something, blank. Lastly, it did the last thing. So it must just be next, right? That's the only one that has to do with the order in which something happened in time. In the 1880s, inventor L.L. improved upon Thomas Edison's design for the electric light bulb. Blank, Latimer made the light bulb more durable by placing cardboard around its carbon filament. With this innovation, Latimer became the first black inventor to contribute to the electrification of the world. He improved upon it, blank, he made it more durable by placing cardboard around its carbon filament. Soon, regardless, however, specifically. Not regardless, that makes no sense to me. It's not however, because it doesn't go against it. I think specifically makes more sense, because this is a description of exactly how he actually improved. Yeah, soon, I guess soon wouldn't be wrong, it just doesn't make nearly as much sense as specifically. Jeffrey Gibson's sculptural object Know Your Magic Baby, an Everlast brand exercise bag embroidered with multicolored beads and a fringe associated with the dances of the Ojibwe people, stitches together, literally and figuratively, recognizable symbols from both native and non-native cultures. Blank, Gibson's piece also blurs the distinction between contemporary art and traditional crafts. Conversely, in doing so, for instance, in particular, it's not conversely because that doesn't go against it. God, what a bizarre type of art, right? So an Everlast brand exercise bag, that's a punching bag, okay, is embroidered with beads, and it has a fringe associated with the dances of the Ojibwe, which are a Native American tribe, okay? So it's a combination of different types of, it combines different types of symbols, yeah, and therefore serves as it blurs the distinction between contemporary and traditional. It's not for instance, because that's not a specific example of the fact that it stitches together symbols. It's in doing so. So I guess you could substitute in this way, or by employing this combination, it also blurs the distinction between, yeah, that's tricky. Wants to emphasize a similarity between Choctaw code talkers and the Navajo code talkers. U.S. soldiers who were members of the Choctaw Nation, Oklahoma, used their native... Well, it can't be that, because that doesn't even talk about a similarity. In World War II, one group of Navajo soldiers was known as... No. Both the Choctaw code talkers and Navajo code talkers transmitted coded... Yes. The Choctaw code talkers, not the... No. Wants to explain an advantage of the ICAA's archive being digital. Explain an advantage of the thing's archive being digital. Over 10,000 documents related to the history of Latin American and Latino visual art are part of the... I don't think that explains the advantage, though, but that's true, but not the answer. By offering online versions of historical documents, the ICAA's archive provides more access to these materials without removing them from their countries of origin. That seems to make sense. Among the historical documents in the ICAA's archive are the writings of Latin American and Latino artists and critics. That's true, but not the answer. The ICAA's director, MCR, oversaw the creation of an online archive of historical documents related to... Again, that's true, but not the answer. So the fact that you can keep them where they are geographically instead of moving them is the advantage of it being digital. Student wants to use a quotation to support a claim about Tharp's contribution to rock and roll. Use a quotation to support a claim about Tharp's contribution to rock and roll. Gospel musician Sister Rosetta Tharp had a major impact on rock and roll, and she was no... Well, it can't be that, because that's not a quotation, right? In fact, just glancing at it, seems like it has to be either C or D. So, Celeste Henderson believed that Sister Rosetta Tharp had a major... That's not a quotation. Sister Rosetta Tharp had such a major impact on rock and roll that Celeste Henderson called her, quote, the unquestioned founding mother of the genre. Or, a gospel musician, Sister Rosetta Tharp had the ability to sing until you cried and also until you danced for joy, according to Roxy Moore. But it's not that, because that's not supporting the claim. The claim is that person had such a major impact on rock and roll. And then the quote supports that. So it's C.